Greetings everyone, David here. 10 years later, we're finally here with Avengers Infinity War, the smallest and most independent film to break out into thousands of theaters across the country this day. And everybody's calling off work to go see it because this is the type of movie that kind of ceases to just be a movie and transforms into an event. It's that a collective event that brings everybody together for a sole purpose to go on this ride that has been in the making for the past few years. People keep saying that, yeah, this is a journey and a story 10 years in the making after the inception of the MCU with Iron Man in 2008. Marvel decided to take some bold steps of connecting all of these different movies together in ways that no other studio or even property management even tried to do. And here, after 10 or so years of hard work and great performances by so many actors in their respective films, along with some good direction, but not without its hiccups and speed bumps here and there, Thor: The Dark World, we needed to get to those bumps to learn from our mistakes so that then we can get better and better, leading up to a movie that brings it all in one solid entry, and that is with Avengers Infinity War. So if you somehow managed to live under a rock, you know that Infinity War accumulates this entire journey of all of our characters from the Marvel Cinematic Universe all together in one movie, just not exactly in the way that you would expect. And because of that, I will for sure be completely vague with this review. In fact, it might end up being somewhat of a short review because the less you even know about the movie, the better. And I have to commend them for doing some really great job cutting together these trailers because you are just not ready. You are just not ready for Infinity War, where our team of Avengers finally take the fight to Thanos, who's the big main bad guy that has been built up ever since the ending of the first Avengers, where he was slightly teased, but you thought, yeah, maybe he will be, maybe he won't, I don't know, is this guy really that bad as he is? So then with entries like Guardians of the Galaxy, Age of Ultron, and various others, there's been setup upon setup of how bad this guy can be. And here in Infinity War, we get a taste of his battle up against the Avengers, trying to stop him from retrieving all the Infinity Stones. And the way that Anthony and Joe Russo, who took over directing duties from Joss Whedon from the prior two Avengers movies, they are able to kind of treat the film in a way that Marvel fans would. Because everybody up until this point was kind of theorizing of what could go down, especially because of how ambiguous and really mysterious these trailers were really being. You get the basic premise of how these Avengers are essentially trying to stop Thanos, but how they're going to go about it and in what order and how, in which place and both in actual setting and also time are these characters are going to be fighting not only Thanos but his Legion of the Black Order, which are basically like his little underlings. They were able to handle the events of this movie the way that a Marvel fan would, where they theorized, they look at, okay, the audience is predicting that so-and-so is going to die and this is going to happen. Let's subvert that, shall we? From the moment that the movie starts off, it just starts hitting with the death count and also with significant events that not only shape our characters, but also shape how they're going to go forward in the MCU. Not only within the 2.5-hour running time of this movie, but how they're going to go forward in this movie. And albeit it starts off in a very, I don't want to say traditional, not in terms of the plot, but just the way it strikes its tone and the way it strikes it, the way that these characters interact. Usual for the MCU, where you have characters meeting for the first time and we're also geeking out about it. But at the same time, we have a couple of other characters that are familiar with each other, and it's good to see that warm feeling of like, hey, it's been a long time, let's reunite here for a common cause. And all of these different interactions, we get that feeling. And we went into Age of Ultron thinking that, okay, they're not exactly going to be able to recapture the magic of the first Avengers, of seeing that 360 shot of all of them facing off against the Chitauri. I think they were able to kind of bring that back here in Infinity War, because you have certain characters that weren't even introduced by the time Avengers 1 came out. So now here it's like that person's meeting that person, it's that feeling again. It's like in little spurts, not as big as it was in Avengers, but in little spurts that happens. And that's pretty much what encapsulates at least the first hour of the movie. While Thanos is doing his thing, you have all these different characters interacting with one another after realizing how big of a threat Thanos is exactly going to be. And here in this portion of the movie will probably be my only nitpick, and it's somewhat of a significant nitpick because I do need to point out the things that didn't quite gel for me. And one of them would be that ever so often certain characters will get from point A to point B, and there would be like one line of dialogue to kind of explain it, and that wasn't enough. I'm sorry, but that wasn't enough for me. There were certain characters that would be like, oh yeah, here I am, and I'm like, how did you get here, or did I miss something? Unless I was just so caught up in the death that we just had to deal with. There are certain characters that kind of zipped from one area to the other, and there's a couple of Deus Ex Machinas. But seeing characters' reactions to other people, especially when you knew that their personalities were either going to click, or maybe not even click in the first place, that kind of was able to overshadow my little quips of how certain characters got to be the place that they were in. From that point forward, though, it's just non-stop with the action sequences and our characters going up against the Black Order, and Thanos also unleashing his plans in ways that you weren't really expecting. And Thanos, fucking Thanos. I remember seeing somewhere in the interview that Joe and Anthony Russo were aiming for Thanos to be like the Darth Vader of this universe. I think they did it because he's got the villainy, he's got the power to be threatening, but more importantly, he's got the pathos. He's got that tragedy, both off-screen in like prior experiences that he kind of foretells ever so often, but there's even one particular tragedy in this movie that really gave him that extra dimension that is needed for various other villains, some of which are even from the MCU. And I'm glad to see that they were able to really mold Thanos in a way that I'm like, yep, this guy I'm going to remember far from this movie leading into the next phase of this whole game plan. And with that added, he also has that moment, similar to Killmonger and Black Panther, where it's really tough to argue some of his philosophies and the way he kind of looks at his plan. I'm like, it's difficult to kind of argue that when there's a little bit of that kind of going on here in the real world, especially here in the United States. It's like, yeah, I can kind of see that, and I might be an evil son of a bitch for agreeing with them, but I can kind of see what you're talking about, dude. My only other nitpick would be that I can't for certain say the same thing about his Black Order, or his children, as he also calls them. They're enemies, they're henchmen, especially a couple of which are just kind of effects to be there for the Avengers to kind of fight, and they have some cool action sequences or a little neat design about them, but overall I just thought of them as just obstacles in the way. Save for one. There was one smug motherfucker, I can't remember, something Maul, but he's the guy who does shh like that in the trailer. He was the one that had the much more lasting impact on me, where I'm like, okay, I hate you, but in a good way, in a way where you're just so conniving, and I'm like, alright, you're the only one that's gonna actually stick in my brain apart from these other guys. So when all of our characters, our Avengers, are going up against these guys and waging war, what's cool about the action sequences, besides the impressive effects, or mostly special effects, because I will admit, there were a couple of shots where I'm like, ooh, okay, that head looks, it kind of reminded me an awful lot of Civil War, where you had Tony's head kind of floating whenever he had this shot. There were a couple, like literally 2 or 3 shots where that was happening, because they had to cut some corners with the effects, especially when most of the budget went to Thanos looking mostly realistic. But what really carried these action sequences for me is that ever so often they would do something that had a payoff. They looked at these characters and thought, you know what would be cool if so-and-so did this with so-and-so. Like Joe and Anthony Russo and the writers, they looked at these characters in this property like fans do. And so there's various moments throughout the movie, whether it be with the conversations that they're having, especially amongst the Guardians of the Galaxy, which kudos to James Gunn, who came in and wrote some dialogue for them because it's quite funny. But then you had other characters interacting with each other, like Tony and Star-Lord, like you saw in the trailer, where they you see this interaction being genuine. They don't feel like, oh, that feels out of character from that other movie. And to me, I think the one that really embodied this was Thor. You don't really see Thor that much in the trailers, but I gotta tell you, do not sleep on Thor. Not only because of the way he impacts the plot, but also because this was the guy that was a really good representation of how they were able to not only pay respect to the characters, but also pay respect to their lineage within the MCU. Because Thor in this movie felt like a really good balance, speaking of which, balance, of the Thor from the first couple of Thor movies, where he was mostly serious and kind of like that, and the super comedic Thor from Thor Ragnarok. Like, he had a couple of lines that were between those two type of personalities. So I'm like, wow, I see a growth with you, and you see that happening ever so often with some of these characters. Granted, some got the shorter end of the stick. I'll admit I could have used a little bit more Black Panther in my movie, as well as the Hulk, but at least they give them enough moments where you're like, that was badass, that was cool, and it all leads up to a really striking and emotional ending. All I'm gonna say, no spoilers, is that you are not ready. Kevin Hart warned you from years back that you weren't ready, and this movie is going to remind you. Because if you have a certain prediction in mind, again, these people behind the movie, they thought of that prediction and thought, let's not do that. Whoever you were kind of speculating was going to die or not die, think twice. If you have not managed to see the movie just yet, think twice about that prediction. Because by the end of this, you're going to be thinking, what the fuck? And it managed to hit the feels. It managed to hit the feels. One particular moment, in fact, I was trying to hold back tears because I'm like, you can't do this to me. You guys are too good of actors. You can't. Why can't you guys be terrible actors? Because right now, I would not be sucked into this thing right now, and it's happening. And when the credits start rolling, we all felt physically exhausted. And normally, I say that attribute for a bad movie, like I did with the last Transformers, where I'm just like, God, I feel tired. I feel tired with this movie, but in the best sense of the word, where I do feel like I was on an emotional roller coaster ride, where at the beginning it felt like a traditional I don't want to say traditional Avengers movie, but just in the sense where it's got that tone where, yeah, you got some deaths, and they're letting you know that shit's about to get real, but at least you got a good camaraderie of all these characters working together for a common cause to take down Thanos. But then Thanos shows you what's up by the end of the movie, and you're thinking to yourself, how the fuck are you gonna move forward with this? And I know that this is probably a very bold statement, but Infinity War might just be the Empire Strikes Back of this entire set of movies. So though I had some nitpicks, being able to move me in such an emotional place at the end where I have my theories and speculations of how they could go forward, and being able to not shy away from the death and the destruction that we were all kind of bracing for, and just not kind of giving a fuck at certain moments. This is actually the movie that I was expecting, and I'm thinking to myself, is there any other things that I can kind of nitpick? But by the end, Avengers 4 cannot come soon enough. And it's going to be, and I think I saw somebody tweet this during their initial impression with the premiere earlier this week. This is going to be one long year. I know we still got a couple more MCU movies between now and then, but it's one long year until Avengers 4. And for that, I'm going to be giving Avengers Infinity War a 9 out of 10. I want to say I want to see this a second time, but I'm scared to do so. And I think they got it right if that's the way I feel. So, if you guys have seen Infinity War by now, please post in your comments. No spoilers. Thanos demands your silence. What did you think? How do you feel? And do you need psychological help? Now, of course, you will probably have to, bear a little bit of patience with me, because I'm trying to gather my thoughts together so that I can hit all the right points of what I'm trying to make for my spoiler discussion later on in the future, in the very near future. So stay tight for that. In the meantime, show your support for the video by hitting the like and share button down below, and of course subscribe for more reviews, including that spoiler discussion, coming very soon. Until next time, guys, see you all later. some person just made off with somebody's purse and you gotta go catch them, and it's a little bit time sensitive, but at least it gets the urgent feeling of being a superhero where you have to go take care of this random crime because random crime happens, and they put it here in this game. And then some fucking kid loses his balloon.
Be good now.
What do we say?
I'll never let my balloony go again.
You were supposed to say thank you, you little shit. God damn it. He just abandoned his child.